It is now time to talk about names. Names of variables, names of functions and classes. What parts of speech to use and what size the name should be. I will explain something called the scope rule for names sizes. Names matter a lot in programming. Even with small functions, if you have cryptic names, you won't be able to understand anything from the code you are reading. Names are the main tool we have to express intent. Method names tell you what a method does. Variable names tell you what a variable contains. What parts of speech should I use? Well, classes are nouns. Price, current trade. Don't be afraid to use technical words like service, component, repository, interface, abstract. For example, user service or user component, user repository. They look spammy, but in my experience, they save time. This is a bit of a controversial subject. I actually tried writing code for a while without these helper words, and I often found myself lost. I'm in a class called user. Okay, this must be a domain class? No, it's the service. Well, why not put service in its name then, instead of making me scroll up and try to figure out what class I'm in? Helper and manager must be given a lot of thought, and only be used as a last measure in distinguishing this class. Still, I prefer user manager to user. Plain user makes me think it's a domain object. User manager at least tells me it's not a model. Variables should be a noun. Price, current trade. Verbs would sound silly for variables. Think of a variable called start trading. What would it contain? At most, a boolean. We will talk about boolean in a moment. Or maybe it has a function inside it. It's weird to think of it as being a float, for instance, start trading. It's like something is missing from its name if it's a float. You want to imagine its correct name as being something like start trading threshold. That I understand. Booleans are predicates. Is scheduled, is running. They feel natural in if statements like if process is scheduled, do something. If process is running, do something else. Methods should start with a verb. Get strategy result, create strategy result. Methods that return a boolean should be a predicate, just like booleans. Is scheduled, is running. Your getters should start with get, don't make them nouns. That is a horrible habit. It looks confusing. Confusing is the opposite of what we're trying to do when writing code. And nouns should be adjectives. What about the size of the names? How big or small should a variable name be? I've had this discussion many times, especially since I like very descriptive variable names. Uncle Bob talks about something called the scope rule for variable sizes, which makes a lot of sense to me. If a variable has a small scope, it should have a small name. As long as you can see its declaration 2 rows above, I kind of understand what it does. If a variable has a big scope, it should have a big name. Obviously, this variable is not easy to track, so it should describe itself very well, if it has a big scope, that is. The opposite is true for functions and classes. The bigger the scope, the smaller the name. The smaller the scope, the bigger the name. The idea behind this is that you don't want to have public functions used everywhere with huge names. It gets confusing and it's spammy. You want often used public functions with small names. Also, for small scope private methods, you want a big descriptive name. For example, extract file and output contents. Private methods are only used in their class, and usually only once. This means they have a small scope, so they should describe exactly what they are doing. It's okay if they have big names. You won't see their name often, and you will know exactly what they do. Let's look at some code. The I variable is a convention in programming, but it also follows the scope rule. It is usually used 1 or 2 rows lower than its declaration, so it's okay to be 1 or 2 letters long. Even if it's not used immediately after, everybody would expect the I variable to be the current iteration. So it follows the spirit of the rule. If a variable is easy to recognize, it's okay to be small. I personally don't like variables that are not at least one word except for I or J. That mandatory government tax variable comes out of nowhere. It's probably declared somewhere way above. The second part of the scope rule says that if a variable has a big scope, it should have a big descriptive name. So there it is. That variable doesn't keep any secrets from us. What not to do when naming things. Small names. I often see programmers thinking that if they use very small name variables like tr or td, they will make the code easier to read because there is less of it. That couldn't be further from the truth. It's very hard to express intent using a variable like tr or a function name like dd. Even if it follows the scope rule, I will still promote it to one word. Names that are not real words. They are not small, but only the programmer that wrote them knows what they mean. Another error would be methods that are nouns. There's some sort of need for some programmers to break the rules. They express it using nouns for their methods. Don't do that. User is not a method name. Delete user is. This is true for setters and getters also. The only place where I accepted this was for setters in a builder. This seems to have become some sort of standard and it's too much of a bother to change it in Lombok. Naming is the best tool we have to express what we do. It is almost the only way to show our intent. When you name things, think of the person that comes after you and maintains your code. Ask yourself, how should I name this variable to help the person reading my code understand what it contains? How should I name this function to make him or her understand what this function does? Through names is how your code talks to the programmers reading it. Through names is how you talk to the programmers reading your code. Names are clues and signposts in your code. They guide programmers and help them arrive at their destination. Don't be afraid to make names descriptive and meaningful.